Welcome to our new episode of Speak Revenue. Remember, revenue is not a goal, it's a result. But a result of what? In this show, we turn our eyes from the output towards the inputs. We speak with sales leaders and entrepreneurs about their journeys. Join us in our quest to uncover and learn the root causes of success. Let's unpack what works for them and what didn't. Today, with our guest, Candace Taber. Candace, so nice to have you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It's a great pleasure. For our audience, give us a quick intro. In the good old days, we said Twitter size, that those days are gone.
Yeah.
But in real quick, short terms, who are you? What do you do? And why are you so successful?
I'm a mom, first and foremost, and yeah, love my kiddos. And I do enablement, and the way I look at it is it's just bridging the gaps between data, performance, and content, by kind of nerding out and serving other people to equip them for growth.
So, for me and our audience, what is your current role?
Currently, I'm doing freelancing and consulting, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
working and partnering with Michelle over at Demand Conversion. So
Mm-hmm.
she is an incredible founder. She's got a great marketing boutique. She focuses on
Mm-hmm.
demand conversion. And so we act through a community. So that's kind of the cool thing there is through the sales enablement
But
squad.
there's a community
Had a
called
few
Sales
conversations
Enablement
around what
Squad.
she was looking to add to her
I've never
agency.
heard about this. How can our
Just kind of
listeners
mutual
find
fits.
this community?
Yeah, there is. You can find them on LinkedIn. So there's two great founders, Stephanie and Matt, who started the community, and they're this enablement squad
That's,
is on LinkedIn.
there's
You can
so many
definitely
communities.
find it there
I
and,
love
and get
discovering
connected with
them.
the enablement community.
Everyone feels like a universe of its own. So tell me a little bit, the customers that you serve as a freelancer and together with your partners, what type of what is your ICP? I guess the question is.
That's a awesome question. Typically what we find is they're still in the early stages of where they're looking at moving their growth motion. So maybe have a little bit of marketing, but not a complete demand marketing operation, and really have a little bit of a sales process, or are looking at, go to market motions for what they're doing, right? So they're in those initial stages where they've got a product, they
So that's
probably have had some
typically
trend, but now they're
Series
looking at
A,
some
Series
additional
B.
channels
Are
and
we
how they're
talking
going to,
startups at all, or are we
generate those
talking
revenue
more like
streams.
legacy traditional businesses?
We really want to stick around Series A or B, but startups, if they're healthy financially, right? So I think if we have startups who are looking to raise, that's really not going to be where we're focusing, because there's potentially too much volatility for us, right, to take on, or they're looking for putting their money differently, right? Or they may not have
Okay, understood.
the cash to
By the
look
way,
at
I
an
believe that
outsource any type to
startups
help them
between
with revenue
Series A and Series
motions.
B are the most lucrative market there is, because number one, they're after Series A, so they have money. They're before Series B, and many companies don't ever make it to Series B, so there are just more of them. Huh?
Yeah, I think what's interesting about it from that perspective is they may still be in a position where, okay, now scale comes into place, or moving that revenue flywheel, and maybe they're just unsure, okay, what's on that next move to do that, and how do we get that going? And you have people who are in positions and probably wearing many hats, and you need to expand the team
So let's talk
to get other
now that
things
we are talking
going
about
and
the
start
people
that
in the
process from individual
organization. What
contributors
is
to
the
scale and
typical
build those
persona
teams.
that you approach?
Michelle does most of the approaching. So she focuses more on companies that she's working with. She's done a lot of global companies that are in those early stages. So she looks for sales personas, right? So connect with VPs of sales, chief revenue officers, right?
Let
You're
me ask you
looking
a
for
question.
moving those revenue
Typically, if you
engines
approach
primarily. And
the,
so would want
say,
to
VP
engage with
sales
Michelle she
or the
offers.
chief sales officer or so, and offer them to improve or optimize their sales process, then you run the risk of two objections. Number one, hey, I'm the VP sales here. I know what I'm doing. Number two, even if you convince them that, yes, you know what you're doing, but I can add to this, I can add value, then they still have probably go to their CEO, CFO, their peers, and tell them, hey, I need, I don't know how much it costs, 30, 50, 60K, do this and this sales process optimization. And very often they hear from their CEO, isn't that sales optimization? Isn't that what we hired you for? So how do you overcome this double obstacle in convincing somebody that you can do the job better? I'm, of course, I'm teasing you. And then how do you unlock the budgets to optimize something that probably somebody got hired to
Yeah.
optimize in the first place?
Super good questions. One, I mean, VPs of sales or, higher level sales or revenue executives, the interesting thing is they have multiple pressures, right? Multiple pressures. It's not an easy job. And I respect what they do 1,000%. I think what's interesting is depending on where they're at and where they need to spend wisely to get motions in view. So, Stephen, it's not uncommon in the US market for a VP of sales to look at an agency where they want a little bit more BDR
Mhm.
lift because they're looking for lead gen or top of funnel. So I think it's almost a little bit of a different perspective where when you're engaging with demand conversion, you're more focused on the inbound approach and connecting
Yeah.
and how that's working
Mhm.
to get more qualified or healthier top of funnel because you're looking to help them move that pipeline velocity, with just better qualification. So I'm a big believer that revenue motions work. It's just a matter of when they work and some of the variables and controllables. And getting to unlock budget's really interesting right now
Oh,
because within
that's
US
true
markets,
globally.
tech
It doesn't.
B2B
It's not
space
different
has
over
been
here in
hit pretty
Europe.
hard.
I think
Salespeople still
we
have to
see this
generate
in the
revenue,
space around the globe.
you know? Yeah, right. Yeah. Right, the macroeconomic condition it is widespread, and so now the key is maximizing spend with not a lot of headcount, not a lot of spend on technology, right? It's about efficiency. And so a lot of times what you get when you outsource with a specialization, like you're seeing a lot of this, marketplaces and different specializations pop up. It's a less spend to engage a specialty like a marketing agency or even a BDR agency to generate those services and work as a part of your revenue flywheel, if
Mhm.
you will, on your behalf. So it doesn't mean that there's more tech stack layering or anything like that. Those agencies and services look to engage with what you have and then also take the expertise to get that engine going alongside
Mhm.
whatever the VP or sales leader is
Mhm.
is building. The goal is not rip and replace. It is moving the revenue engine alongside is the key goal, right? It's not, and if your positioning is rip and replace, you're going to get objections all day long, no doubt. But providing a cost effective option with a specialized service that has, customer proof to
You said
generate
proven
results,
service.
that's always
Step
going to
us
help get your foot in the
through
door to be a little
your
efficient for their
approach. So
operating costs.
when you reach the crime scene, what are the first things? I'm running a webinar series, CSI Revenue, where I do a little bit forensics on think things gone wrong. Yeah. So when you approach a crime scene, what are the
I've
first
seen that. I
measurements?
love
What is the
that.
first thing that you
I
do?
love that approach. It depends what we're looking at. So the first thing I'm very holistic, so I always like to get a picture of where are we at, and what are you doing for lead generation, or where is your inbound demand happening? And a lot of times there's a point towards meeting sets, and that kind of tends to be a common top of funnel metric. But I think it's looking at that first stage conversion is for that top of funnel, then what's happening after that initial meeting is set, and where is that velocity happening in the conversion, if it's happening, right? So is there a planned motion for who you're reaching out to? What ICP have you worked with? Are you getting any traction there? Are you solving a real problem with your product or solution offering? And I tend to look at that more holistically, because it's really, then I'm going to sort through, do we have a data issue, a performance issue, or a content issue, and we're just not resonating? Even though you may have a great product or solution, you just may not have found the right way to communicate it to where they're going to respond and go, oh, I get what you're trying to solve for me. And if I keep going
So
down
suppose
and
I'm
I don't
the
make a
CEO
change,
of
this
a
is going to
Series
cost
A
me greater in the
company.
long run.
How do you find that fit for me? Yeah, how do you make sure that I solve a problem big and important and expensive enough?
How do I find? It's a good question.
Yes. Yes, step me through your process. Like, imagine I'm the
And
VP.
so how we approach
Not
it.
not VP sales. I'm the CEO. Series A startup. How do you help me? Hmm.
How do I help you? So, well, typically this is where Michelle comes in, because she's having the first direct
Hmm.
conversations. So then what we take a look at once they come in, and where she'll involve me in
Hmm.
the process or conversations, is we've nailed down some
Hmm.
issues once they agree to talk with her, right? And so there's either missing collateral, there's missing um, messaging for their sales process, or optimizing how they're communicating with their customers or their market, right? And so what she does is she takes a look at that holistically of what we need. So we productize the enablement part of it to come in and say, well, we're going to make sure that you at least have, with your stage or your deal journey, that you have all the assets that you need for that journey to help get your sales people in place. It also depends on the size of their sales team, and if they have someone, if they have some. What we've found recently, right, the sales teams are a lot smaller. There may even be a salesperson of one. And so what we're looking to do is just expand that reach. So she focuses on that demand side, which brings a lot of value, because a lot of CEOs and founders are trying to figure out what does generating demand mean? What does that demand piece mean? And how do we get that part of the engine going? What I focus on with the enablement piece is getting the salespeople
How do you do this? Do
or
you
sales
mimic
team
the buyer journey,
equipped
or
with
do you
the collateral they need for those deal
interrogate
stages.
the salespeople till they give up and tell you what they need? How do you
Mm-hmm.
what's your approach to figure out the needs and get a picture?
Well, what's interesting about just enablement in general is there's companies that can identify that that's a need, right? Or there's sales leaders, when they see some gaps in their process or things, and they're looking to hire an enablement person internally. So what we do is we kind of look for something similar where they are in the stages of building. And most companies are in those early stages, may not have an enablement function yet. They may be looking for it, but we kind of uncover that, hey, you've got a need for enablement, and here's some things that could be really helpful. People are spread thin, or they've tried to piecemeal decks and collateral together. There's not really you may have someone who's doing marketing operations, but there's one person. So in that early on stage, what we look for is to bridge those gaps between marketing and sales, to mimic the journey. Okay, so here's your hypothesis, or
Mhm.
here's what current customers you may have in place. This is what their journey looks like. Here's how we're going to map out some assets as a hypothesis and some collateral that you need. Get you that collateral, and then we're going to start the iteration process to see if this helps make it a little bit more smoother, that you're getting those access and things that's needed to equip people to get the velocity of the pipeline moving a little faster. And that market education piece, buyers are learners. So one of the crucial things we've got to focus on is how are we delivering education? And a lot of times people do a great job trying to get stuff together and want to get something in place. But now when we're looking at more education and sales enablement, now we're taking a look at what that customer journey is and getting those pieces in place that are more succinct, that are communicating the value proposition, that are branded, and able to get that micro content that, pique their interest, or, hey, I can apply your solution or product this way. So we map out the deal stage, and that's how we productize enablement, right? Is getting out that deal stage map and go, here are the things that we want to checklist and have on hand.
Does that mean that you map out every stage of the sales process and create a checklist? This is what the customer needs to be able to learn at this stage, and then he can.
Yeah, that's it. Oh, sorry, Stephen. Yeah, that's the idea. So
yeah, I wrote this down. Buyers are learners. That's a beautiful quote. I'm stealing this. So I'm gonna get it. I'm getting into two with this. I love this.
Oh, thank you. Well, thanks. I'm glad you do. I think one of the important things we look at is, well, what are the learning objectives that we want to happen in the deal stage, right? Like, what do we want them to learn so that we walk away with some momentum? It's about them and what they're learning. I think a lot of times we've approached buying processes and we're like, what box do we want to check off? Instead of looking at what do we want them to learn so they're excited to move forward and they feel equipped to adopt the product or solution if they're going to engage in purchasing. And I think that's a big thing with it. So yeah, it's refining that list of, okay, when this stage, ideally, here are some objectives and here are the outcomes I'd like at this stage. So here's the content I want to put in place. And so what we did is we've mapped it out. We have a checklist of things for each stage and what that looks like, and start to look at the needs assessment or needs analysis of that company to see which is appropriate for their product.
So many questions, so many things to uncover here. I'm like a boy in a candy store. You speak about velocity. How does buyer enablement or sales enablement speed up your pipeline?
I think, well, one, I know you're about speed. So I think that's where a lot of your curiosity, a big thing for you is about process and speed. And I agree with you. I think, but that's the thing that's the thing that I failed at early on.
We all did this. We all did this. If you ask salespeople, there's always a collateral missing. It's this magical flyer that I'm going to send over and it's going to close the deal for me.
Yes. Yes, and that magical flyer either doesn't show up as in the inbox or it doesn't close a deal. But I think that's the thing we've got to start with, is a great design system that says, this is the ideal collateral I want to have. And then I want to start looking at our stage conversion and the timing to see if that collateral is helping at least keep that healthy. So for example, looking at what you offer in your system of control, you're looking at that process piece. So what we have to apply to process is also putting the collateral within those stages to see, is this helping control the variable? Is this helping move us along? If not, and we fail fast, then we can go, let's try this, right? But move it into that same part so we can see if that's going to work or push things along a little faster. I don't think a lot of times people within enablement talk enough about change management and kind of frameworks that are needed to really organize and map against sales process and customer journey. And that's where
measuring the before and after. I want to go in a different direction, if you allow me. You spoke about collaterals and educating the buyer.
Okay.
You mentioned marketing. just had a conversation with Stacy Sussman from New York, and we were chatting about enablement, and we came across what Gong did. Gong, I'm a big admirer of their content marketing. This is how we got into this conversation. And I realized the content marketing is built around lead magnets. And we all know a good lead magnet is a complete solution for a very narrow problem. And their lead magnet, they're doing a software that records sales conversations and analyzes them. That's the core product of Gong. If your calendar is empty, you cannot use it, right? First, you need to have appointments that you can actually record and analyze. So what their lead magnets is focused about is here are 25 templates for cold emails. Here are 25 openers for cold calls. It's all about how do I even fill the calendar? Because if you look at their lead magnets, what it does is it enables their customer to even use their product. So my question to you is, have you discovered this? I just realized this a couple of days ago. Have you noticed that or seen a connection between the collaterals that you use in sales and how you can take them and make them lead magnets as standalone solutions for problems?
I think that's a really good way to put it, but that's part of education is I think we tend to get really excited and we develop these beautiful pieces that are well written a lot of times and they say a lot of stuff. How do I get there? How do I get there? And Gong did a really great, they connected the dots right early on with their collateral to do that. They enabled even people who didn't have training or development, you could go and get free resources in their in their downloads and things to basically have a guide or a framework. So I think to your point, we've got to get into the how and create that opportunity. But that's where I talk about their buyers are learners. Now they're going somewhere else to learn because they don't want to download another white paper or another long-winded thing. They want the how. We're in what I would call a learning economy where people are looking to skill up or they're looking to get into different places. The labor market is really interesting with hiring and there's so many changes. The best thing we're looking to do is learn how do I get to my next step. And the more we focus on how is where I think we get that attraction. It's one thing if we find something that entertains us, right? We all see content that's entertaining and it's fun and we like that. But if there's no how, it usually kind of leaves us, right? Because it's already done its wonder, it's entertained us, we got that little bit of dopamine and we're kind of done. But the how is what keeps us going and pressing forward. And the how is where am I going to get an ROI in your product if I don't know how to apply it? And that's why I think prior, when there was a lot more spend in tech and there was a lot higher tech stacks, you had potential investments of tech that weren't getting adopted.
Yeah.
Because I think they may have had beautiful collateral, graphics, and those things.
It doesn't help
but it was around
the prospect to grow.
Practical application, pragmatism. And exactly. And that's where we're at is we're focused on how is this going to make you grow, right? Like it's not enough as am I solving a problem, but am I enabling someone to solve the problem themselves and empower them with the how and the solution, and now they're the champion internally in their place, right? And I think that's a big shift is did I help my buyers learn and get them and the how
that's beautiful
and get
way of putting it
and be successful where they
what
are and
have
set
you
them
tried
up to really win
that in
really
hindsight was a total failure? I can tell because you're so
Oh,
smart, you're so
I mean, I have many
experienced, and you
failures, and
only
I'm
learn
I'm
from
pretty good with
failure.
that. But I go
You
back.
really have been around the block a couple of times. You've seen stuff. It shines through. So I'm thrilled to talk to you about this.
Oh, thank you, Stephen. Well, I think one of the biggest failures I had, I think, especially within enablement,
Mm,
was I did a large investment spend on enablement technology too soon. And I was really, really in pain and needing to scale something and thought that this piece of technology, because I knew the potential of what it had to do, was going to work, right? Well, I it didn't just out of the box do what I needed it to do. So I just thought it was going to come fully loaded, ready to go, and it was going to scale this pain point that I had. No, I had to dive in and figure it out. And that put me back time, it put me back communication. And we still had an internal problem that I spent political capital saying we were going to solve. And I was behind on that delivery. And what I realized a big part of that was it was process is I needed to think more operationally about how that was going to happen and get equipped in my how to on the operational execution of it
mm, mm.
rather than
It's
kind of
like a
just go
second
into my own
price.
thing
It's like a
going,
second price
this is going
tag.
to
It's
be
not only
great, this software
the
is going to
cost of
scale
the
it, it's going to
technology,
multiply
time. I
being
mean,
in 10 calendars at
it's
once.
interesting
Yeah.
how we are willing to invest time before we invest money. We go on demos and we have all the meetings. We are willing to give this away for free, our time, not realizing
Mm,
that time is probably a lot more valuable than money because you can always get more money, but you don't get that time back. You can increase the budget, but the 2 months you lost in implementing that software and then deciding not to use it for whatever reason, you don't get that back, right?
mhm.
Yeah.
That's everything right there. It's the mindset around time versus the tangibility of whether or not we have a budget or not. And you're exactly right. We don't get time back. And so did we end up
Mm.
delivering and putting in place? We did. But we lost time, which exacerbated the performance problem. And that is where we should be now is our focus on time is a lot more expensive. You're right. We don't get it back. Um, but the problem with time is also the mindset around failure. People want to boast about successes, and that's great. But you want to know something? I've learned so much more. One of the best things that ever happened was a miscommunication with an executive leader, and they did not hear me or what I was saying. And it was because I was not speaking their language in revenue. And what I realized is that I had to get really clear about revenue and measurements around sales to communicate the value of enablement or learning. And that has been a practice that has taken place since because that executive didn't care that
Mm.
enablement or learning was needed for customers or or people, and that's how you value them and that's how you develop and grow. What that executive cared
Yeah.
about is what that was going to mean in revenue and potential profitability, if it was going to increase deals, and if it was going to increase customer retention or expansion. And I wasn't speaking
Yes.
their language. And I'm like, well, they're
Yes.
just not empathetic enough. No, I wasn't speaking the language that was needed for them to communicate the measurement and the results. And I've had to get really clear about this is how we align it and this is how we framework and process so that enablement has value and it's value that doesn't get questioned because we are working towards the same goals, generating and expanding revenue or potentially looking at what that looks like to make that successful for sales. Like the goal of enablement, the goal of learning development, the goal of HR, the goal of operations, we all have revenue goals. And the more we can align on that,
I
then we
love how
can get an
you with a
organization that
beautiful story
is
described
honoring
the
diversity of
motto of this
perspective, but
show.
aligned towards the same goal.
Revenue is not a goal, it's a result. And we need to understand a result of what in order to achieve that goal. That was beautiful, Candace. Thank you so much. That brings me to the end of this episode of Speak Revenue.
I
I
like how you're saying
want to
that.
thank you, Candace, for joining us today and sharing so beautiful and interesting insights. I enjoyed it a lot. Huge shout out to our listeners. Your support means the world to us. Remember to check our website at speakrevenue.com for a full transcript and additional resources. And if you enjoyed the show, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you go for your listening needs. It really helps to get the word out. Also follow us on LinkedIn and on Insta and soon also on YouTube. We'll be back with another great guest. Until then, stay curious, keep listening, and keep learning. Candace, thank you so much for joining us today.